Those online. Welcome to those online and those in the room. Will be started here shortly. Just give us a few minutes. Welcome to our Weber County work session on this Monday, the 1st of July. No fooling. It's just after 12:30. I'd like to entertain a motion. We've read the minutes from the work session before on March 25th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion approved.
Second. I have a motion to approve in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Those minutes are now approved and we'll move on to the discussion regarding the TDR project. This is great. Mr. Crockett's here with Stephanie Russell, Sean Wilkinson, John Von Scott Park, Brandon Quinney, Scott Mendoza. And we have Jessica Clark here too as well. What I'd like to do, Mr. Crockett, our chief counsel, civil matters, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And I
Take
need
it
to
away.
apologize, one of the individuals that should be here, but I forgot to invite until the very last minute is Charlie.
Yeah,
He said he would try to get here, but again, that was me who only notified him about an hour ago. But commissioners, we met earlier, maybe it was a month and a half ago, to talk about transferable development rights. And you gave us some assignments and we wanted to report back on that information for you to consider and to give us direction going forward. One of those was to talk with our bond counsel to see if the county, or if a bond question could be on the ballot regarding the purchase of transferable development rights. We talked with our bond counsel, Randy Larson. And the answer is, it can get complicated, but the short answer is yes, that it can. There are examples of this happening in Summit County, in Wasatch County, and Midway City. It could either be a GO bond, or it could be a bond out of the municipal services account. It could also be a sales tax bond that could be done. And so we want to report that it is possible. Some of the things that you will have to consider is one, is it connected to a municipal type services? There a plan, and there has to be a public benefit that is acquired. And whether that's like the development of trail systems, or whether it's saving particular types of viewpoints and open space through conservation easements. There'd have to be some type of a plan with that. It has to be, it can't just be an intangible interest that the public receives, but it has to be something in recordable form. So most often people, the entities that do this will record a conservation type easement.
Associated with the land serial number.
Yes. And so other options that we talked about as far as funding this, could be through impact fees. Again, we talked about geo bond, municipal services geo bond, creating a special service district. There's also just simply downzoning the area. That's always an option. One of the things that Randy brought up to us is when you ask if the public was to approve a bond like this, you don't really know how much to issue the amount of the bond for, so it'd be an amount up to. And so these entities that have approved these, they haven't even fully realized the amount of those bonds yet. I think I can't remember exactly the amount that they allowed up to, maybe set, for example, up to 10 million. So that'd be something that would be challenging because we'd have to look into how valuable these TDR rights are and how much we actually want the bond up to. Whether you do it through here's John. I already apologize for forgetting to invite you.
I'm glad to be here.
Part of the challenge again is figuring out how much to issue these bonds up for. And if you were to do it through a geo bond, the question becomes, should this be something that this overall county-wide is paying for, or is it a subsidy of those who are living up in the upper valley? The other question is, if you go through a municipal type services bond, are you going to be able to generate enough revenue out of that area, a sufficient tax base to actually make an impact and secure TDR rights? So we recalled from our conversation with the commission last time that one of their questions was they just wanted to determine whether or not this is something that would be of interest. One little side note that I forgot. Usually these rights aren't retained through the government. In all of the other examples, they're transferred over to like a land conservation nonprofit, a 501c3. When we talked to the commission previously, one of the questions was, well, is there an interest up in the Upper Valley for doing this type of thing to secure and retire transferable development rights? And we were brainstorming to come up with some different options for you to consider. And one of them was, well, if you put it on the ballot, you're getting one shot to ask one question. And we wanted to suggest to you a possibility of maybe issuing a survey out to the landowners that live up there. This would allow you to acquire the same information, but you can actually get more detailed information. You can target questions specifically to large parcel owners, to small lots, and you can really ask as many questions as you want. You'll be able to get that information earlier than the election. So we just wanted to provide you with an alternative because although it is possible, it is quite laborious and can be quite expensive. But again, we just wanted to give you all the information, let you discuss, see what other questions you have of us, what additional homework assignments you have for us, and where the commission would like to go from here. And Charlie, was there anything that you wanted to add? I didn't elaborate on impact fees because I can't remember exactly how we would fund that, but I did have that on a list of possible funding.
As far as impact fees goes, I chatted with Cortland a little bit about Portland in here about the impact fee facilities. The code, the Impact Fee Act says that you can charge impact fees for a public facility. And then the definition of a public facility is pretty loose on what that is. And so at the time, I don't want to put words in Cortland's mouth, but at the time he said that he could probably defend a conservation easement on private property in favor of the public conservation easement on private property to be a public facility. And so there's a possibility. He's not aware of any circumstances, nor am I, in which impact fees were adopted to just purchase conservation easements. Impact fees could be applied to actually purchase the land. That would definitely be a public facility, but, I don't know that that's what we want to do.
May I add one more consideration as well?
Yes.
If, for instance, the public does vote in favor of a bond to fund a program like this, so let's say you set a survey out, survey's hugely in favor of some kind of program like this, and then even a bond passes, so even getting past those gates, there are still issues to consider when it comes to acquiring these TDRs. So when you have the money for it, the idea is willing sellers, willing buyers. Not everybody's willing to sell their transferable development rights. You know, property owners, up in the valley who own property now, can choose whether or not to sell their TDRs to the county, even if the incentive is there. If the county then chooses to exercise any option like eminent domain, there could be some additional layers of complexity in trying to determine value and whether the county can even use eminent domain to acquire TDRs. So we haven't gotten into those issues, but that's just another book we have to open if this bond, if the public chooses to put this type of bond on the ballot and it succeeds, county has to figure out what each individual transaction acquiring TDRs will look like, and they will all be different.
Well, and we want, to add to that, we're not gonna know the price until
Yeah.
they're negotiating as
Mhm.
far as,
That
actually
would-
acquiring the TDR. So we don't know exactly how much to issue the bond amount up to. What's the political limit that the public would tolerate there? And that bond authorization would last no more than 10 years.
So it'd be like a 10-year program.
10-year program to issue bonds at, in the amount up to, we'd have to identify that amount, so,
So one of the other avenues that we spoke out, in addition to bonds, and then, that kind of transitioned into a survey to actually find out what the temperature, to gauge the temperature of where this is at, and, you know, but one of the other, avenues that we discussed is just the straight going through a conservation easement and figuring out a way to incentivize the business, the property owners to go into a regular conservation easement. So that would be something you could use the bond proceeds for. And it wouldn't be as expensive as going in and actually purchasing the TDRs, but instead you're incentivizing the property owner to go into the conservation easement process with the state. There's Utah Conservation Trust would be a great partner to have. And that would keep the local government pretty much out of the transaction, other than to incentivize them to go to the trust and go through that process.
yeah, I did write down, going through a land trust, but I also did write down possibility of doing a park district. Cause I think there's a park district out there that matches the boundaries of what we're looking at. So that's an option.
So the Utah Conservation Trust, just to be clear, that's last year there was some legislation run where the state was gonna put in some money to incentivize those property owners if they had so much property, they had to have so much property to take that property and put it into a trust,
Mhm.
and they would give so much money towards that. Do you have the bill on that, the year on that?
I can dig that up for you.
It's the Department of Ag.
It's under the Department of Ag.
So, and as of July 1st, we take all our rollback funds and contribute a percentage of those to that fund. So, yeah, I don't think the discussion really needs to be on TDRs. I don't think that was ever the intent. The intent is to partner with the Department of Ag and encourage property owners to create conservation easements. None of this should, in my opinion, none of this should be directed toward public doesn't own it. Weaver County doesn't want to own it. We don't want to have any more parks. So, that's just additional maintenance. We want the property owner to continue to farm the ground. And you do that by a conservation easement. In essence, saying you pay for that conservation easement, and you take those TDRs off the table. You don't set a value on the TDRs, you set a value on the conservation easement. And in my mind, this could apply Ogden Valley, it could apply out west. The idea would be, you know, and I don't mind the idea of the survey, because there would have to be some type of public funds that we would put in addition to the rollback taxes to create conservation easements.
Yeah, and we would have to shift the terminology, like you're saying, from TDRs to
Yeah,
conservation.
I don't, the
It has to be
discussion
something
the
recordable.
discussion shouldn't be on TDRs. It should be on how do you create a conservation easement that retains the property in private hands, but changes the use, that it becomes agricultural. I mean, you saw that with portion of the monastery. You know, there's different conservation easements that have been placed, and I know there's people in the valley that would consider it, you know, if there was funds available to do that. And so I think you create open space, you say, what's the benefit? Could be benefited toward water. I think with some of the water bills coming about, there may even be some connection to state funds on water. Because you then you might be able to take some use of water and, you know, the state has what, 200 million put aside for purchasing rights.
So what you're saying, Commissioner, is if this is focused towards conservation easements, then the TDRs would go off the
Sure,
table. So the byproduct
Right.
of going into conservation easements would be those TDRs associated with that land mass would then be taken off the table. It would be the byproduct of going into.
So what takes place, I mean, we looked at the monastery when the state was looking at buying that, and there's actually two appraisals that are done. You create an appraisal based upon development rights. What happens if you have X number of lots? This is your appraisal that the owner can receive if he turned that into lots. Here's the value if you kept it as agricultural. So the delta then becomes the value that you'd start discussing in terms of, okay, what will you take to put this conservation easement, which wipes out the TDR? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it works. And there's different funding sources through the state, Utah Open Lands. There's other sources that we could potentially use for that.
This leaves it in the property owner's
Yeah.
hands to decide what to do with their own
But
property.
we don't want this, no way do we want this to become public land. That's not the intent of a conservation easement.
So, does anyone else have any other questions? I'm gonna ask. So commissioners, what would you like us to do? So we initially were asked to look at it as far as is it legally permissible to bond for this, which is yes. What next step would you like us to take?
I like the idea of doing the survey. Let's see, I think that would, but what's the cost of a survey? Have you put any of those numbers together, Sean?
So
Here?
when we did our general plan in 2016, Charlie, do you remember? I thought it was close to $10,000 to send something to every registered property owner.
It was, I think it was a little less, in the valley, just that we had, over 5,000 parcels.
Okay.
And so I think it was about 3.
Okay, maybe I may be off.
But I mean, that was a little while back. We have a lot more parcels now, than we used to.
Would you need, maybe it's a two-step survey. I don't think everybody in the valley, if you live on a half acre or 3 acre lot, you're not gonna do a conservation easement.
Right.
I think the first step you take is look at how many, you know, agricultural pieces have over a certain acreage, whether
Yeah,
that.
the state, that's already in definition.
Yeah, so whatever would be, you know, allowable to subdivide. So let's say if you had a subdividable piece, which basically would be, you know, 6+ acres in our terminology.
Yeah.
Then those are the people should receive the survey first. And then if that turns out, hey, you send it to a group, would you be interested in the conservation easement? Then the next step is how do you fund them? And then it goes to everybody else, because then we're gonna ask, okay, friends and neighbors in Ogden Valley or out west, are you willing to contribute so much per year to buy conservation easement? Yes or no?
Mhm.
You know, you don't want development. The way through development is to have conservation easement.
Okay, so
Exactly.
to say again, to help fund conservation easements, because we
Yeah.
already know the state
Yeah, to help, yeah.
through the
exactly.
Department of Agriculture, that Utah Conservation Trust will give the lion's share of it. So this would be just a small portion to help fund that.
This would be in addition to our rollback taxes. So, yeah, I would say we do a partnership with the Department of Ag, and I don't know what their criteria is. We have to, after July 1, we'll know kind of what their fund balances are and say, okay, what would you look for us to contribute to get some of your money?
I like that.
But,
What do you think,
so
Cheryl?
I just say, so there could be 3 sources of money: Department of Ag, our rollback taxes, and then an additional source from some type of taxing entity in the valley. That's how I see it.
Not to just add stuff to a department without talking to you first, but I would think that this would fit within planning as far as drafting up or coming up with a survey for us to look at. Is that what you'd like us to do, is just give you a draft of a survey and then come back and report on that and then?
I like
I
that.
don't think that hurts.
No, I like
I would actually really like to hear from the people who, again, the state has a criteria on what that landmass is, and then we could,
Yeah.
with things in mind that could be either, I think in that first step to the landowners or that second step, keep that running total on there. John, you have some great ideas on that.
What I'm hearing from the meeting is, how do you educate and help the public? And I think the survey was some narrative at the beginning saying, here's state law, here are the players, here's how this might work, look and work. These are the successes we've done in the past. Bring up the monastery as an example of, and the county put in $50,000.
Yeah.
Of the 100,000 that was available from the summit experience, and
Yeah.
they have another threshold after a number of lots or whatever, but they have another amount coming up, probably in the next 10 years that, would probably contribute to the county. Based on the agreement that is there. I can't remember the exact amount that it is right now, but it's, but that's another source of funding, but I think the educational component is the most helpful.
Agreed.
Attached to a survey and say, here's a game plan. Do you guys want to participate with this game plan? And I think with the monastery, there was I thought millions that came from the state. I can't remember the dollar amounts right now. And then they added another 350,000, of which the county contributed the last 50,000 to that. I can't remember the exact.
Well, the Utah Valley Land Trust, they have a Utah Valley Land Trust. They raised and generated money from people, and then the county put in some money.
And that's one of the
And
success
that's-
stories.
yeah.
You say one of the success stories that we've had is this and these. So you kind of couple education, the state, and successes we've had in the past. This is what it might look like. When you look at this rollback thing, I don't know if the commissioners differentiate between where the rollback money comes from. So if there's rollback out west, if you want to keep it out there as a tool,
It's a good thing
as
to
a
look at,
tool to
yeah.
look
I
at.
would say.
And if there's
Makes sense.
rollback in the Ogden Valley, if you
Yeah.
look at that, it's kind of say, so these are all things that we haven't really looked at because that law specifically is brand new. And you may want to just explore options, educational options and ways to create a model. And then say, public, how do we tweak it?
Right.
How do we make it work? And the survey then helps gather enough information that you can get in.
And Sean, I think we checked with Department of Ag and see, they might have some guidelines already in place, and then we can use that as kind of a starting point.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure they have some guidelines in place.
sure
I
they-
mean, not, I'm sure they have something, so this would just be not to, this would be to enhance or maybe that's all we do is use those, but you know, some kind of something.
So timing wise, you're looking for this to be on November's ballot, is that correct?
I'd like to give people, well, if we end up putting it on a vote.
Right.
Okay,
If we end up putting it on a vote, let's see what the survey goes through first, but if we could work that backwards, and so if it needs to go on a ballot, just because of the way that we, the people, have put the processes in place, if we work it backwards there, then we have deadlines for what those would be.
Have to be at least 75 days before the election.
Okay, there's one of them. And then, so the results of the second questionnaire would need to be 90 days maybe before, right?
yeah, and the only reason I ask that is because we have this incorporation following that same track to be on November's ballot. And how does that
Could it confuse?
work together or confuse, or that's the only reason.
It's a
I bring
great
that up.
point.
So it may
It's a
be
great
worth
point.
waiting to see the results of the incorporation election first, to see which authority has to address
I
this.
just bring that up as a question
Yeah.
to the commissioners.
Yeah, I thought about that actually, but yeah.
That's a great point. You know, for me, and even notwithstanding the incorporation, it still would be nice to at least have the answer to the first questionnaire back. There can't be that many. I think the state's definition of land, isn't it 10? Does anybody know? Is it 10 acres or
I can't
50
remember.
acres?
I
Or
looked it up once, but
I don't know.
I could find out for you.
that can't be
That many people.
1,000 people.
No,
Now, are you just looking to potentially fund this through the Department of Ag, or do you want to look for other agencies and or trusts that are happy to offer funding?
check with Utah Open, I mean, there's a gal, I've got her name somewhere, Utah Open Lands does that. They do a lot in Summit and all over.
Whatever could help the process, I think would be good.
I'll see if I can, you can look on the Utah Open Lands, the gal that's in charge of that, worked with us at the state a lot. She's primary, good source.
Then she might could help you with water and with all that other. So 90 days, November, that puts us 11, 8, 9, 3 off 8, puts us in
It's
the
probably gonna
August.
honestly be a lot sooner than that, because there, if it is gonna be something that you want on the ballot, how much are you going to want to issue those
Right.
bonds for the amount of? So there's gonna have to be quite a lot of discussion ahead of time. But I think we're early enough that we could draft up a survey.
You know,
Have you look at it.
and does that have to be on a general election or does it have, can it be on an off year too? Can it be on, could it be maybe next year?
I think it could be next year.
Sometimes elections, you know, are only on the even years with general elections, right?
I'd have to double check, but it could, maybe on this one, or I assume the next one, but we'll take a look at that. But you'd have to also decide whether you want it to be a geo bond or just a municipal services bond.
And the difference between those would be municipal services would just be those two areas that are unincorporated
Makes sense.
Correct.
versus everybody in the county voting on a geo bond. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So as far as clarity.
That's the difference.
It depends on where you identify where the public
Yeah.
benefit's going to be. Is it a countywide benefit that you feel that all of the citizens need to be contributing towards? Or is it something that is just specifically going to benefit those living in the unincorporated area as far as who should pay for it at the end of the day?
It depends on who you ask, it'd probably be two different answers.
How do you decide that?
Yeah, I think
The
so.
answer to that question.
Huh?
How do you decide the answer to that question?
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I mean, I tell you, if you're living in Ogden City, you probably don't wanna see your taxes go up to buy a piece of ground in Ogden Valley
Or
or out west.
out in Reese
I-
or, yeah.
So maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's more proper to be municipal service.
If there were a way though, that the people from Ogden Valley could benefit from the visitors in Ogden Valley, be that through whatever mechanism that is, I know there's a portion, there's some sales tax, but if there were another way that they could benefit somehow from that, it could go towards that, that'd be great.
That's a different idea. Perhaps using a portion of sales tax revenue in a specific location.
Well, that was also one of the things Randy Larson said was permissible.
Sales tax. See, and that's. That's probably a good thing to look into. I don't disagree with that.
And the election can be held on any election year, so if
Great.
this year, next year is fine.
So, again, let's just say, not to confuse the matter, but just in the big picture right now, that if we still started now.
Yeah.
And you said it's complex because we don't know the amounts, but if we get things started right now, and we continue to move it forward, then, and maybe we target for 2025. Then we'll have the results of the election of the incorporation, and then we can continue to move that. It's not, the way I see it, we held off on the general plan for Lower Weaver County because there was a question on whether or not there was an incorporation. But it didn't mean we stopped doing everything. We still were working behind the scenes, and as soon as we found out the results of the election, we still pushed the button because we were already prepared to do it. We pushed that button in January, right after that happened, and started to move that direction, right? So I think it would be a smart thing for us to do, to at least move in that direction. And then if we'd end up not doing it, then we've spent $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 or something just to find out some answers to, as it relates to the conservation trust and the people in conservation easements. And I think that information would be worth the investment we would spend in that right now.
I agree.
It seems good to bring the trust board or representatives from them into this discussion because they've got insight and experience, and have them provide some feedback.
That'd be good to have.
Anybody else in the public, west or, at least that has that experience to kind of guide some of the discussion a little bit.
And maybe we run this by the planning commissions. Both directions, Charlie,
Their interest is.
to get their input.
It's a good idea.
I wouldn't mind putting that on an agenda.
Would you like to sit down with the Ogden Valley Land Trust and see what their
And,
thoughts
yeah.
are?
Oh, that'd be absolutely.
So
They're gonna have a lot of good information.
I'll see if we can get a time, a work session time with them, and I'll invite Summit County Land Trust as well. They've been doing this for quite some
I think
time.
that'd be great.
It'd be awesome.
Okay.
Let's go with that direction for now, if that's
That'd be
okay.
good. So
Thank
Chris,
you.
let me ask you one last question. So on the bond amount, couldn't we say we're going up to a certain amount? So, because we're not gonna know until we get into the thick of things, whether it be 5 million or 10 million.
Randy
Or 2
Larson,
million or 20 million.
Yeah, we don't know. And
Randy
then we don't know what
Larson
we're gonna get from the Department of Ag.
he mentioned, what's your political limit?
Oh,
I
okay.
said, 'cause most of these entities like Wasatch County, Midway City, they haven't
Right.
issued all the way up to their amounts yet. It's just what will the public be willing to approve?
Right, okay. But we could set a limit and just say, look, we're gonna put 5 million or 10, whatever it is. Once that 5 or 10 million's gone, it's gone.
Or you don't even have to issue that
Or we don't have-
entire amount.
Right.
We don't have to do the full 10 million, right?
Correct. Just as long as it's, it'll be determined within 10 years.
Yeah, okay. I think we got a path forward here.
It jumpstarts an agenda, is what it does.
Yeah,
It does, and I think it's the right thing to do.
it's the right thing to do.
Gathering information, hearing from the public's never wrong.
You know, we do have an opportunity now with these, the state water to kind of partner on some of those funds to see. Again, there's some tie-ins in various parts of the code I think we could look at. That was just developed past this year.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand, we've got three takeaways here. Number one, let's explore funding options with different entities. Number two, let's get a work session with the land trust and maybe others of those funding entities. And then number three, start putting together a survey and identifying properties to send the survey to.
I like
Thank
them.
you.
Yeah.
All right, commissioners, if there's nothing else, appreciate that discussion. That's great. I'll entertain a motion now, commissioners. We have got an attorney's office update, and we'll hear from our attorney's office, Chris Crockett, Brandon Miles, and Chris Allred. Let's just take a moment to move the players in the room.
Second. There he is.
Are you ready for us to come in?
I don't know that we are.
Seems like every time you show up, it costs us money. I don't know.
This one's free, man. Totally
You know what?
free.
I'm building a house right now and I feel like the same thing. Every time I meet with somebody, it's about $10,000 every time I sit down with this person.
Welcome to our world.
No, we are not asking for any money today. This is just an
Wow.
informal.
It sure is. That's why you're not wearing a tie today.
No, I
Okay, we're
learned this
formal.
little deal from you. You might recall, we had this discussion. He
Yeah.
taught me I can, if I wear a coat, I don't have to wear a tie, but apparently if I don't wear a coat, I have to wear a tie. Is that how it goes?
Something like that.
Wow.
Is that it?
Or flannel.
If you have a big enough beard, you can.
You can cover up the
Yeah,
tie
that's true.
and
Ah,
with
true.
flannel.
It's written into law.
And
Good look.
and
Yeah.
that would be
Like
it.
it.
So we had mentioned, speaking of money, at our last budget hearing, that we wanted to come in about quarterly, just give you a little update on kind of what we do on the criminal side. You see Crockett and the civil team throughout the county all the time. You have a pretty good sense of what we do on the civil end, and I'm confident our guys are just doing a fantastic job there, but you don't always get a chance to see what's happening on the criminal end, except we show you some numbers at budget time, or something pops up in the news. So we thought we'd just go over a little bit, kind of show you what the numbers are, so you know what we're dealing with in terms of how many cases we handle, that sort of thing, and
That's
what's
great.
going on out there in Weber County, and tell you a little about some of the different types of cases we handle and why we do some things. For instance, Brandon's gonna tell you about our federal prosecuting program and why we do that, what's the value of that, and then we're gonna have Steve tell you a little bit about our cold case program so that you'll have a sense of that. You remember there was a woman that contacted you just before budget time, in fact, about
Yeah.
saying, hey, look, she has a loved one that was a victim, and it's a cold case, and So in response to that and some other things, we've done some really, I think, outside the box stuff to try and be able to be more effective on those cold cases as well. So just a little update. If you had any
That's a
questions,
big deal.
great.
Wow.
If that's all
Wow.
right.
Things that make you go,
Those
wow.
victims.
Well, go ahead, Brandon.
Hopefully. So we just finished our first quarter, so this ends up being sort of the perfect time to kind of evaluate kind of where we are and what this year is going to look like. So usually when we meet, we talk about district court cases, which is our more serious cases, our felonies and our class A misdemeanors. And then we also measure by total numbers of cases that we receive in Justware, which every case gets a unique identification number. And so this
So
year's.
that includes district court, justice court, juvenile court, all of the
Yeah,
different
so
types.
every case that comes in our office for review. So we're currently at 922 district court cases. We project that out to the rest of the year, we might hit 3,688. Kind of by comparison, last year we were at 3,932 cases. So we're probably gonna hit pretty close because we haven't hit the busy summer months. It's when we typically see a lot more filings happen. And so once we hit that, I expect that number will start to accelerate a little bit. In comparison, 5 years ago, we had 3,003 cases total. So we're still at kind of a higher watermark for that. And it looks like we're gonna be there consistently. For total numbers of cases in Justware, we're at 1,813 for this first quarter. This puts us on track for about 7,252 cases. Last year, we did 7,246 cases. So we're pretty much, again, right on that same trend. Compared to 5 years ago, it was 6,057 cases. So we're still pushing a number of cases through. And, you know, as we've talked about, and you've seen, I think we had the commission presentation, you know, that's the homicide cases, aggravated felonies, run-of-the-mill felonies, and that sort of thing. We've still had, unfortunately, quite a few homicides in the last few months here. I think of the last 3 that we filed have all involved children as victims.
They seem to go in waves,
like
right? I mean,
spurts.
we'll see a handful, and I don't know what accounts for it, of these just horrible child-related.
Yeah, the most serious one, kind of right now that's pending is on Jonathan Dunn. This was a case out of Roy, just before Christmas. He physically abused and assaulted a pair of 2-year-old twins, a boy and a girl named Alistair and Laura. Alistair died of his head injuries. Laura had similar kinds of injuries, but she ultimately survived, luckily. I mean, these children were beaten pretty bad, bruising all over their bodies, that was inflicted by him over the course of several days, before Alistair ultimately succumbed.
Was
to
that the
his injuries.
Riverdale case?
It's Roy, but
Oh,
yeah,
Roy.
it's right up there, just outside the border there. Dunn had been to prison before for aggravated child abuse. He'd seriously injured a child previously and had served time and had come out, finished his parole, and then now we have this case. So we got 2 counts of, we got a count of aggravated murder and a count of attempted aggravated murder. It's a very serious case. We will certainly be having some significant discussions about penalty and death penalty at some point. It's currently set for preliminary hearing in May. And stuff. And so once we get past that point, we have 60 days to make that decision, and stuff. And so, you know, like I said, the other 2 cases that we filed recently, both involved children as well, infants in those cases. Juan Uranga is a kind of a serious drug trafficking case that's kind of typifies what we're kind of doing, with the federal stuff. So we just caught Juan Uranga, who was on federal supervised release, which is basically their equivalent of, they don't have parole, but they call it supervised release. Essentially, you don't get out early, you serve your time, and then you get supervised just like a parolee afterward. We had prosecuted him. In fact, D. Smith filed the case and prosecuted him before he passed and had him sentenced in federal court to 3 years. He just came out a few months ago and got caught again, this time with fentanyl, methamphetamine, and another firearm. And now he's looking at more like 5 to 6 years time for federal sentencing and stuff. And so that started here in the state, but we're gonna end up, he's actually scheduled to go to grand jury here soon this month.
I'd love to give them just a
Yeah,
brief
yeah.
overview of if you're not familiar, we have this Project Safe Neighborhoods
Mhm.
situation, which is we've identified sort of a boundary within Ogden that's under this federal Project Safe Neighborhoods. And the theory is that the US Attorney's Office is willing to take more of those cases than they would otherwise. It's a focus area. And in theory, we package those cases up for them, bring it to them, and they prosecute it. In practice, we package them up, bring it to them, and prosecute them. But we do that for a reason. It's a lot more work. We don't have to do that. But for some of these worst drug dealers and guys that are shooting each other, these top bad guys commit a disproportionately higher level of overall crime. So if we can take them, prosecute them federally, we'll get way more stiff sentences, and we'll put them in prisons outside of the state. And the whole process is covered by federal dollars rather than state dollars. So it's a benefit that way, but it's a big benefit for these guys that are just repeat offenders. And bad news, take them out of Weber County and you reduce crime pretty significantly by getting rid of some of those bad guys. So that's why we focus on federal prosecution out of our office.
So Clark and I are the two cross-designated SALSAs. We indict on average between 40 and 50 people a year here in the county, and our average sentence typically is between 3 to 4 years. And stuff, and these are, even at that, these are cases where in the state system, we might be lucky to get 3 to 4 months. They might go to jail for 90 days or something like that, and then they'll be put right back out in the street and right back out in our community to be supervised in our community. And so even on average, we're getting much longer sentences in the federal system for that. And again, it leverages federal resources in terms of that we're housing less these days, but we used to house quite a bit more federal detainees in our jail. But with bed space becoming an issue, they've cut down the number of beds, but those beds are generally paid for by the feds too and stuff. So instead of just sitting there on our dime, the county's getting reimbursed from the feds for those time.
And those that we don't have on the federal dime here, we send them off to
Nevada.
for or whatever.
It's not a unique situation for Weber. All the jails have cut down any bed space for fed inmates, and there's no federal detention center in Utah. So they're shipping them to Nevada. And so people are making their appearances, being transported by the marshals from Nevada back up here.
These are all guys. These are all guys that otherwise we'd be prosecuting here and be taking up our beds and our resources.
Boy, I like that.
I mean, the last three, or I picked 3 out of the last about 6 or 7, just to sort of see what our sentences were. Nestor Lujan was just sentenced to 96 months in federal prison with 4 years supervised release to follow. He had 1.5 pounds of meth. He had a significant criminal history, 17 offenses in there, but a lot of them he did not go to prison for. He kept getting put out on probation and reoffending, but still not getting hit hard with anything. So even if he'd gone to prison, we're not seeing them spend very long there. They might spend a year, they might spend 18 months. This is a guy that we're gonna see, maybe in 8 years at this point, right? Paris Thornton, he was a well-known person. Yeah, I think we had a homicide that occurred at his residence here a few years back. He's always around and always involved in criminality. Didn't get tagged. He got tagged with a few things here and there, but nothing as significant. We finally caught him with a 1/4 pound of meth, 19 grams of heroin, and 256 fentanyl pills, which is an ever-growing problem. He got 90 months out of this. He might not even have gone to prison, quite frankly, in our system based on those quantities in his history. He'd never been to prison in the last 10 years. Everything he had, he was put on probation for and stuff. And so Ivan Miranda was my case. I got 73 months on him for a drug trafficking and a possession of a firearm. He was on parole for evading out of the state system. His only history was a prior ag assault in 2015 and a misdemeanor assault in 2015. He's a known 19th Street gang member. His name, again, like Paris's, was always kind of surrounding other criminal cases and crimes, but never enough evidence to prosecute him on those things alone. But it takes these kinds of cases and that kind of effort, I think, to really kind of take these people who we know are problems and get them off our streets for significant periods of time and stuff. And so that's kind of some of our federal efforts that we've been putting in. And then Steve was going to talk about some of the efforts we've been putting in on the cold case investigations. And the developments there.
Yeah, we started off, and myself and Steve Zaccardi, the other investigator, started looking at a couple of cold cases that we kind of carried with us from our prior, departments, me being Weaver County and Steve being from Ogden City. Taking them with us and just kind of looking into it. One being, the one that the mother contacted you, Commissioner, looking for, trying to free me and Steve up, you know, with more investigators, more resources and more money. Well, me and Steve kind of decided we were gonna expand, basically, into a cold case unit, and we run the homicide task force down out of the county attorney's office.
And just tell them, in case you
county-
don't know exactly what that is, briefly what the
The
homicide task force
homicide
is.
task
It's
force,
kind of a
it's
big
built,
deal.
it's built up of all agencies in Weber and Morgan counties. They donate detectives who volunteer to come in and work every single homicide, no matter where it is in the county. So if Ogden City has a homicide, they call me and Steve. We call out as many detectives as needed, up to, we have 30 detectives at our disposal, and we can flood any homicide with experienced detectives who will come out and help with the canvassing, help with interviews, help with suspect gathering, help with evidence collection. And
And
they're
by the
all,
way, these typically occur at about 3 a.m.
exactly, and we call them out.
Usually by
Yeah, it's always 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when all of a sudden I start calling people saying, hey, can you come help? And they come out and they do such a great job, and that whole first 48 hours is a real thing. And if we can get a suspect, if we can get evidence, and we can start work, and we start in on that first 48 hours, we can get evidence, we can collect those shoes with the blood on it, the clothes with the blood on it, and eventually get to the point where we're taking it to Brandon and Chris saying, hey, we can file these charges for a homicide. So that's the task force has been around since the mid-80s, and it also gives smaller departments experience. So when those departments do have a homicide, they're not like they're drinking out of a fire hose going, I've never handled anything this big. And even if it is, they can still rely on us to come in and be experienced and come in with suggestions and help them with the
We've got
interviews.
San Juan County, they just don't have resources calling us, asking for the benefit of our experience to help them with a double homicide they've had down there.
And it's a great program. We even went down to a cold case conference and told a similar size county investigators about how we do our homicide task force. They've already called us and asked for our policies and to try to mimic what we're already doing, because it is really, really awesome, and it helps out so much with these cases. But me and Steve decided, hey, let's use this model, and let's use the detectives already assigned to the task force and ask for even more volunteers from that task force to bring all of their cold cases in and to house them with the county attorney's office. We've got this room, we're putting we started out with what we thought were 17 cold cases of what we could find in all of Weber County of murders that had not been solved, clear back from, talking the 60s, 70s and 80s, 90s, up until just last year. Now that we got those detectives digging, we've come up with 33 cold case murders. And some of them we didn't even know about. Some of them have been sitting dormant. Some are sitting in evidence rooms, just gathering dust. And the benefit of this especially is they will not go dormant, because we will always have a hand on them. And what I mean by that is when you're working a major crimes detective, and all of a sudden a mother calls in from a 2016 murder and says, what's being done about it? That sergeant's like, he wasn't there in 2016. So he goes to the most experienced detective and goes, who's working this case? Nobody, boss. And he's like, well, you know what? You're working it now. So then they go grab it off the shelf and they hand it to that detective. He's like, okay, I'll start working it. When he starts going through it, starts getting up to speed on it, all of a sudden, here comes more case. Here comes an aggravated robbery. Here comes an aggravated rape. Here comes a murder that ties up that detective for the next month. And by the time he even gets back to even thinking about reading this case, not even working it, just reading it and get up to speed, he now has 30 more cases coming across his desk of fresh cases that have fresh evidence and fresh things to work on. So then that case all of a sudden ends up back on that shelf, because that detective gets promoted or retires, or that boss moves on and gets promoted or retired, and that case goes right back onto the shelf. And I've seen it because I worked it. I worked those cold cases when I was at the sheriff's office, and that's the experience that I had. I've never had time to really dig into it. So that's why I kind of carried some of them over with me when I came over here and we had more time in between the murders. I don't have the aggravated robberies and the rapes. You know, in between murders and the officer involved shootings, we started digging in and actually started doing interviews and looking at evidence and stuff like that. But now we're going to have these cases housed here and me and Steve are gonna keep track of them and keep detectives involved in them and meet every other Wednesday with this unit. And we're looking for funding. We've already applied for grants because technology in these labs and DNA testing and what we've learned about an MVAC thing that basically you put water onto a spot on your evidence. It sucks out the water and all that DNA and just that little spot. You're talking nanograms, but now the technology to extract the DNA from those nanograms is so much better. And even a combined source of two people, they have this new star mix that they can separate them and they can look to see who the major profile is and see if that's your suspect. And if it's not in what they call CODIS, which goes into the main statewide and nationwide search, if that suspect wasn't in there, we can now do genealogical examination of it and find
cow.
that suspect through genealogical testing. And it all costs money, okay? But we're looking for grants. We're looking for even to go to private companies and say, would you sponsor our unit?
We're trying to get creative, maybe do like a 501c3 and I don't know, maybe, you know. this
Exactly.
Cold case murder
This cold
brought to you
case
by
is brought
Big
to
D
you by,
Construction.
yeah, by Swire Coca-Cola, you know, anything that we can do
Great idea.
to try to get, because the MVAC system, every filter that they run is gonna cost us $750. And that's just for a piece of evidence that big that they're squirting with water and vacuuming out of. So it's all something, but we're gonna get creative. And we're going to we've already got a couple of them approved a grant through the state. SBI has the purse strings on that. We've got a couple cases already been approved to do the MVAC and to send it off to a lab that the state lab recognizes their work. Therefore, if they get a CODIS ready sample, we can get that to the state lab, put it into CODIS and then move on from there. But we are making some really huge strides in a couple of cases, one being from 1982, where two girls were murdered within a week of each other. One found floating down the river and the other one found half buried in a ditch in Harrisville. And we're making progress. And we've got a really viable suspect that I think we're honing in on. And so it's exciting. It's exciting and we got some really good things going. And I hope that if we can't maybe solve the case and get somebody convicted, you know, they might be dead. It might be, the suspect might have passed on. But we can get a resolution for the family.
Closure is really important. A lot of these people are still in contact, like in this case, some of the family's very involved and reaches out to Steve on a fairly regular basis. And it's still, while it's not still making the news, it's still important to these families to get
Those
that
families,
closure.
it's
Yeah.
top of their mind all the
Yeah.
time, I can tell
Yeah.
you. So how you get along with the state lab, I'm interested, as I
You know
oversaw
what?
the state lab and
Depends
a lot
on
of
the
money
day.
into that new building in there.
Yeah.
So,
Depends on the day.
okay.
Because when I talk to them and I say, hey, you know, I want to do this and they tell me no, we have a bad day. But then I meet with Rebecca Kay, who's the head of the DNA, and she, you know, has walked me through what we can and what we can't do and how we can send this here and send that there and how we can look for funding here and look for funding there. And so she's been way helpful. So it like I said, it depends on the day, but they're our state lab. And so we really have to keep a good relationship with them. And I think that it's tenuous sometimes at best, but we're definitely getting there.
Well, I would make sure that story is told to some of our legislators because that's the ones where they have to get their funding through and.
Absolutely.
If there's, you know, I just see if there's any issues, I'd get a hold of a couple people down there. I can give you some names and you might want to have some talk with the director because, you know, they've got a lot of resources. They've got a lot of money put into those, to those programs and facilities and infrastructure. We want to make sure it's used.
There's so many private labs that are that are doing so much of this DNA work,
Yeah,
but not every single one of them is recognized by our state lab as being accredited. So if we send it there and they work up a DNA profile and it's
Yeah.
CODIS ready, our state lab's like, nope, we won't touch it. Because we don't recognize their work. So we have to find out the labs that they agree with us on.
okay,
And they're private labs, and so they do a lot of things the state labs don't, like NVAC
Yeah.
and Star Mix and things that our state lab is behind on because of funding, about lack of funding and lack of, persons and able to,
Yeah.
keep up on the backlog. But we're definitely, I think we're on the right track with this idea, and I'm hoping, just like the homicide task force, we go to another cold case conference and we tell them what we did. And it's a model for other counties to mimic on these cold cases. I really do. And we're meeting like this Wednesday and gonna go over a case and see what we can do with it. We're just getting the wheels rolling on this thing. We've been just doing it for a couple months now, but it's got traction.
With this DNA, just quick, and we'll wrap it up with this DNA. Not all cold cases are murders. They're mostly working on the murders, but we have cold case rapes and things, for instance, too. We just had one very recently where we got refers to the CODIS, the database. Got a bad guy up in Idaho or Montana or something who they just incarcerated. They take his DNA. We get a hit, pops up on our case, boom, and we've got our suspect in a rape case. And so a lot of these things that are happening with DNA are really rapidly improving. We're getting a lot more effective with that.
And then, so when that, boom, that pops up in our DNA, then do you prosecute him here as
Yep.
well?
Wherever
Yeah.
the crime occurred.
Well,
If it's
first,
here, then it's here.
Yeah.
Well, first, and we've talked to the lab about this, because they're very fearful, you get this CODIS hit, and then it really, now you've got to go back and prove that CODIS hit is your suspect. That's one thing that we wanted to make sure with the state lab, that it's clear that we just won't run out and grab somebody just because their DNA hits.
Yeah.
We will investigate and show why that DNA lab or CODIS hit is our suspect, to make sure that, and write another warrant, and then to get a direct comparison and jump through all of those other legal hoops. But so much more investigating has to go into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we've got the guy though, right? Then we still have to jump through those hoops, whereas we didn't have a suspect. Now you do, so.
Yeah, the other important
pretty
part is just the sheer collection of the cases and digitizing of the evidence so that it doesn't get lost over time and stuff. So, because all these records and things are just scattered.
yeah.
Because even if agencies helped each other before, this agency has that piece of the puzzle, this other agency had other pieces. Nobody really knows all of the pieces that are out there. So surely collecting them, putting them all in one spot so that we know which pieces we have and what is missing.
And then
Trying to preserve it for the future so that, we can actually.
And then there's fees for cloud space and everything else on top of all that.
Eventually, but the idea is that we want to make sure we don't lose a case just because time and it just got thrown out inadvertently because an evidence custodian didn't know and had been there for 20 years and stuff and stuff. So just really trying to put our hands on everything that we can and make sure it's protected is the other big part of this. So
Thank you so much.
that's what we've been up to.
Yeah, so just an update. We'll try and hopefully come back roughly quarterly and give you some new information on different things that we're doing. Just, there's no reason that you'd know a lot of these things if we don't update you, so we thought we'd like to pop in.
Chris had that idea the other day about having an update every quarter, and I think it was really.
Great idea, appreciate it.
That's how it got, but I
It's cool.
appreciate you doing it.
Really appreciate that. It means it's gonna make a world of difference to these people, just to know that they haven't been forgotten.
Yep.
That you're, hey, we haven't solved it, but we haven't been forgotten. 90%, that's what they wanna hear.
Yep.
Well, we have a motto in our homicide task force, and that's everybody counts or nobody counts.
Yeah.
And we mean that, and we're not gonna forget anybody, and it doesn't matter if you're a homeless person, it doesn't matter if you live up in the richest house on the East Bench. We're gonna work it the same.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Dylan.
Appreciate it.
Oh, we forgot about the ask.
Thank you.
Oh, just.
By the way. We're good. Thanks.
We'll put a pin in that one.
Too soon.
Yeah,
I'll be right back.
we thought you guys would like to know what they were doing.
I love it.
Keep
No, that's
connect-
good.
connected
We
with the-
haven't heard from him for a while, so. You know, beats the heck out of these easements and conservation.
Yeah,
easements.
right.
You find your cat?
Still too wet. I won't go down there until probably tomorrow. If it's alive, it's alive. If it's dead, it's dead. That's how it goes.
At this point in time, no, not what you can do. Come on inside, get your way. Hey.
Yeah, I did see them. Come down there for change. This is my big dog.
There.
How are you? Yeah, how you doing?
It exists. Strip does not, so. It's very kind.
It's still cold. It's cold. It's still cold. It's snowy.
Getting up there was nice, cause nice going. And then I got up, come up by the. And I started up again. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, the wind was blowing pretty good, and I got going real fast, and Simon, I sweat, and then I started into the wind, and my half.
So-
Yeah, come back down.
If we do convey it to,
About died coming home.
Oh.
then.
What you got out?
There, and that's no interest in it, access in there.
Too little, too late, though. So we got to take drag races, and this is wonderful. 2 weeks.
But then, but it conveys a big one to the Trust Foundation.
Well, John,
Yes,
here to talk about real estate, huh?
we are.
Just get that from the county. And we don't want to make this, so I don't know.
Yeah. Was Bear Lake frozen or an open? Oh.
Is it right? We'll wait for Commissioner Bolos, but in the meantime, there's no reason we can't, while you're all ready, getting ready. Let's just be,
Motion to go into closed session.
motion to go into closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to go to closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. This is to discuss, the purchase of a lease
Mouse should be over with you. Oh, Gary has it now, sorry. Kidding. I put it over there and then Gary took it.
Stole it. How do you?
Just hit the green arrow. Yep, the green, yep.
There we go. Okay, we're unmuted.
There's our video, thank you.
There we go. And then if I pull this up, is
Then-
it sharing that?
I hope, yeah, and it should online too, so thank you very much.
Good.
Great. We're back now to our discussion regarding the school crossing on 3500 West. Our presenters today are Gary Myers, Sean Wilkinson, Lane Findley, and the awesome Joe Hadley. While Mr. Findley isn't here, we sure appreciate the others from staff that are here, and we'll go ahead. With that, Mr. Myers, would you start the presentation, please?
Be
You've got
happy to.
got the video?
I appreciate that. So right now, I met with the school district last week and they had several requests. Two of the three were really not too big a deal and easy to accommodate, and I can explain those to you here in a moment. But the third one was a little bit tougher request to really jump on board with until we have your approval. They're in the process of building a junior high right here. And if you follow these roads that kind of work their way through the subdivisions, their safe routes to school walking plan for a junior high gives them up to 1.5 miles distance that they have to provide safe routes plans for kids to get there. That brings them to this intersection right here of 2100 South and 3500 West.
Highlight that with the arrow, please.
Yes, sir. Right in this
Thank
area
you.
right here. So their request was that the county purchase a flashing pedestrian beacon light, install that, and then stripe a crosswalk for pedestrians right here at this intersection. So a couple concerns I have with that, commissioners. Number one is simply the cost of the flashing light. They're quite expensive. And do you remember the cost off the top of your head for those, Joe? Weren't they about 75?
Well, they're $2,000 a piece,
Okay,
Yeah.
2,000 to 2,500. And you'd need 4 of them.
yeah. Yeah,
Well, do you need flashing lights on the advanced warning or just the?
probably just the active crossing part where the actual
You
crossing
need 2
is.
flashers and 2 regular signs in front of that
Yeah.
advanced warning.
So you're talking about a $5,000 bill about.
Well, just for the flashing lights. And the 2 regulars are $1,000. And then the crosswalk itself's.
Okay.
The other concern I have, commissioners, is if you're familiar with this particular stretch of 3500 West, right here, there's a significant grade set, change right here where the road 3500 heads downhill over the top of the canal and down towards West Haven. Yeah, you and probably others as well. One of the concerns I have is the northbound traffic does not have a lot of reaction time as they're heading north on that road, approaching this particular location where they want to put this crosswalk in. I brought up to them potentially moving that to this 4-way intersection where we're looking at it for potential for a 4-way stop. They said that puts them a little further out of that 1.5 mile radius, as well as they feel like the kids that are gonna use this crosswalk are gonna come from the subdivisions over here. And so the kids, if they live there, they're not gonna travel north here up to this intersection, just across and then come back down and follow 2100 back over to the junior high. So, kind of looking for maybe some opinions from commissioners on this.
Show us where the school is again.
Yeah, great question. Let me push it back over here. So the school is going in on this big
Mhm.
empty lot right here.
Is there a walking path along that canal that's to the south?
You know, not at the moment. That
Wouldn't it be a
canal,
wonderful walking
Oh.
path, safe routes to school off the.
so
Quite
quite frankly, if we could get the kids onto this canal path right here, that's probably a more convenient access to them from these neighborhoods.
Have
where
you
the-
talked to Charlie about when we do those subdivisions or anything like that, having a easement or having right of way along there, the canal?
Well, we certainly can. That would dictate the subdivision actually triggering or taking place on these as well too, right? But I think we could certainly have conversations with the canal companies and see, but you know,
This is,
Go ahead.
This is Commissioner Bolos's, neighborhood out there.
My question is, do you know what the distance is from this neighborhood? The walking distance, because it's not a radius. It's actually a direct path to school.
The path of travel, right, right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, no, you're exactly
And it's still-
right.
And it's still under a mile and a half?
That's what, I asked them that specific question. I said, now, are we talking radius or path of travel? And they said path of travel. And I believe that took them somewhere a couple 100 feet away from the intersection where they're proposing the crosswalk be.
Would be a
So-
mile and a half.
Yeah, so we were getting close to the end of
Because,
the,
I mean, because you're coming down here, you're coming
Mm-hmm.
over here, you're going back to the north.
yeah. It's not a real straight route, so to speak. However, through the subdivisions that it worms its way through and snakes its way over there, it does get them to the school site. The other question I would have too on this is, and I apologize, I might be speaking a little out of turn on this statement, but usually when you start getting close to that distance, a lot of the parents will drive their kids. I say that.
We do that from this distance.
That's right.
That'd be a mile and a half.
And like I say, I might be a little out of turn, but I live literally a lot closer than this from a junior high in Layton. And the line of the cars is
Yeah, no,
pretty impressive,
Have they
pretty
done-
impressive.
Have they done any studies on other neighboring junior highs, like how many kids actually walk to school? I mean, as a,
They didn't really do much of a study on this other than just looking at what their safe routes looks like.
The community council just has to designate a safe route.
That's right.
And that's like, I was part of that for West Haven Elementary, and there was this little weird jog where kids had to go one direction and come back the other direction to make it safe, and even though the parents said they're not gonna do that, well, that's their safe route. It's designated as their safe route, whether they use it or not.
The other
It
challenge.
sounds like we need to entertain having a crossing there anyway. It's gonna be part of the safe route at some point.
Well, maybe, and the other interesting thing here, and maybe you can speak to this, Commissioner Bolos. Usually when you put a pedestrian crosswalk in, you wanna do a warrant study to show that you have that much pedestrian movement actually taking place. I couldn't find the chart in the book on that, but I wanna say it was right around the high point being around 20 pedestrians per hour. And I can do a little more digging and quote you chapter and verse if that's valuable to you, but there is an actual warrant study that's done for those.
And
We could
you're
do
not
that,
gonna
but it
get-
wouldn't be until this school year, because it's not
Right.
school now.
Yeah, we won't see that till the school's in
But then if
session.
something were to happen, you know,
yeah,
but if they designate the safe route to school, we put the signs there, a kid crosses somewhere else and gets hurt. Is that on, I mean, I just don't want a kid getting hurt. That's why I wanna see it on the canal. That those, we always are focusing on the separation. You
Yeah.
keep coming in and
Yeah.
telling us the separation between car traffic and foot traffic,
Yeah.
right?
And it is valuable, and quite frankly, Commissioner, to your point, to put the crosswalk at the canal is a much better location for sight distance for motorists, because that puts it right at the peak of that curve there.
Right.
So
That's
you
what
can
he told
see the
us.
kid from both directions.
And they can have the lights flashing on the canal or something
Yeah,
like that, you
that'll,
know?
you'll be able to see that a mile away.
Can you go back to the safe routes to school and say, hey, look, this is the direction we'd like you to move?
So I had that conversation with them when we met with them the other day, and they said that they wanted to put it here because it was the natural location. You know, if a kid lives north of there, or if he lives south, if they have to come down here to cross, they're not gonna cross and backtrack.
The same thing goes for the kids who live to the south.
Yeah.
They're not gonna go up to the north to cross.
You're exactly right, Commissioner, and that's why they wanted
exactly
it at
right.
that particular location, because that's where the street that comes through the neighborhood ties into 3500 right
Go
now.
down this way more.
Yes.
What's in this neighborhood? How do they get out?
So, yeah, no, they would, right now, there's nothing along that canal.
They'll be bused then probably, because this is,
Yeah.
for them to go out and around and back. is
that's
gonna be
probably
more than an
past
hour
the
and a
2
half.
mile,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Too bad they didn't have an access at that cul-de-sac, you know,
Yeah.
a foot trail access,
But they have canal access. Right?
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
For
a trail.
Well, there's an easement for the canal back there, but I don't know that there's a public access along that canal right there.
I don't think you get an easement from a canal company.
So
Is that the Wilson Canal?
that is Wilson, that's right. Yeah, that's where it comes out on 25th.
Okay, so that's West Haven?
No, not quite. So interestingly enough, Commissioner, West Haven has a small little section that does come across right in this area for this subdivision and this one as well, but up north where we are, Commissioner Farrar, this is still
But
unincorporated.
they'll probably be bus from West Haven, I'm assuming.
I
Yeah,
wish Charlie or Rick were here. Why don't we have paths for canals? We need to do that.
well, I just don't think anything has instigated that to happen yet.
Well, now it has. So now how do we move forward with that? Sean, are you in the, yeah, what do we need to do? High Point, everything makes sense on that. There's other municipalities surrounding that it follows there. Right. I think we stay consistent with that.
What does it take even to start that though? If you try to do that right here, you have to break through this cul-de-sac.
Right.
You have to fence the canal. I mean, it was all part of developments when I was in West Haven. That was just protocol.
Correct. The other thing too is that subdivision happened 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Roughly, three or so years ago, maybe, so the junior high had not even really begun construction yet, so it really wasn't an issue back then that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, but the schools had that property for a long, long time, and they're actively looking for other property everywhere else. So as soon as a school buys a piece of property, we need to keep thinking about that and putting safe routes to school, add that to our list. That's probably a really good idea.
Yeah, I would agree.
Although that cul-de-sac puts those kids into a busing situation.
More than
What it
likely.
does, is it puts this cul-de-sac into play, you could probably have this cul-de-sac, or I hate to say it, but something, how these other cul-de-sacs come, this was what I was thinking of, this cul-de-sac into play, this one goes over the bridge right to there. I don't know, we're talking about people's houses
Wow.
too.
Yeah.
Are we
Yeah,
sure that
I need
that's,
to buy
are we
those
sure
easements
that
now.
that area is a mile and a half,
I don't know.
under a mile and a half?
That's what they said.
Well, I do.
Did you measure it?
You know,
They
No,
have a lot of money.
I didn't,
we took their word.
I didn't have any reason to not believe them, but no, that's a fair question.
But I
I
think you
know.
bring up a point for discussions with the schools, which we should have for future school sites.
Yeah.
We need to have better, and this goes with roads, this goes with UDOT. You know, there needs to be communication before these happen,
Yeah,
before they're even approved at our level.
right.
And decide what we want, and then we need to have this discussion. I was gonna bring up even with our planning commission, because as we look at this general plan, then it gives us the opportunity to say, okay, you know, you got a school going here, it's a junior high, let's make sure our higher density goes around that, which then creates a more walkable
Mhm.
community to the school,
Yeah.
instead of putting it out. We wouldn't have to go through this for a couple of reasons, but
And I wish.
that's for the future, not now, but I think
wish-
we need to have that discussion at some point, Mr. Chair.
I agree.
I wish the school district were here to kind of
I do too.
participate in this. We invited them, but, I don't know.
Well, they can do what they want.
Yeah, Lane Finley's on there, but he's not there.
Is he on the call? Oh, no,
No.
no, just on the appointment. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he was invited, so. So anyway, the other two locations they asked for were kind of no-brainers, of just striping some crosswalks. One of them was right here at this intersection where the new high school's going in right here, so. And there's not a lot of huge costs involved with striping a crosswalk. That was one of them.
Is that gonna be a four-way?
It's not.
It's not now,
And it won't be?
it's not intended to unless we see a reason to do something about it.
Where's the
Probably-
parking lot on that school?
Was that the one that? Clear over on the north.
We talked about doing a study on 35th and 1800.
That's right.
They also requested,
And that's not the safe route to school that they wanted to go, because you talked about that.
yeah, I did,
And then
bring-
yet it still feeds the high school. It's another feeder to the high school.
I did bring that up, and they saw value in having that changed to a four-way, but it wasn't close enough to make it work with their safe routes.
So that didn't go very far with them.
I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a conversation with superintendent and chair of the school board and say, look, this is what we're running into here. Let's do this. We don't wanna do this 15 times.
No, it would be much easier to address it earlier on, like you say, Commissioner Harvey, because yeah, there could be other things that need to be addressed as well.
I can have that meeting and return a report.
Perfect.
That'd be great. Wow.
I got all kinds of spare time.
Yeah.
So they requested one at 4,322.
Flashing?
No,
Just a
just
crosswalk.
striped.
Crosswise.
They requested a striped one here at this intersection of 1,800 and 4,300. And then they also have an elementary school going in over
3,300
3,300.
and 51.
There we go. Yeah, they've got one going in. Right. I zoomed in too far. This particular lot right here, there's an elementary school going in right now.
Where is that?
So this is 3,300 south and 5,100 west.
Okay.
They asked us what our intentions or plans were for this road right here, because as you follow this road to the north, you've got this whole subdivision that falls within walking distance to the elementary, as well as this subdivision as well.
That's walking, really?
That's what they said.
Hmm.
And so, I told them right now, we didn't have any intention to do any sort of pedestrian surface or anything of that nature. Just because we get a lot of pushback from residents in the area that are not very excited about the development. And are not gonna be excited about us coming in and just popping in a walking surface, so to speak.
True story.
So essentially those other three locations here, would just be probably a crosswalk north to south, right, to get kids across 3,300. And then those two associated with the high school. And then the big ask was the one on 3,500 right here at 2,100 south.
2,100 south and what?
3,500 west.
35.
If we looked at a crossing there, Gary, would it make it safer, to move that to 2,200 south? Because of the elevation?
Maybe, honestly, Commissioner Bolos, I think until you actually get right on that canal itself, the closer you get, the scarier it gets. There, because as you're traveling northbound, you get over the canal and then it's almost as if it goes down a little bit right there. And I think 2,200, the intersection of 2,200, you're just far enough away that I would hate. My worst fear, commissioners, is to have some car come through there too fast. And we've done speed studies and I know how fast, not everyone's doing it, but it's the occasional one that scares me. And I have kids going to school.
Okay, I was just asking.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, if it's in their safe, walking, safe
safe
route,
route to school.
I'm not opposed to putting the signage up. I think it's our responsibility as a county.
Okay.
I know it's $5,000, but if it fell in the city, they would, the school district would be looking to the cities to do it.
Mhm.
Just my thought. That's just my thought.
Commissioner Faur,
Yeah, I don't disagree.
that's where I knew we were gonna land anyway, because
Yeah.
it's kids, but on the
Yeah.
flip side, it's in the wrong place. And they're not wired, so they could be moved if eventually the path was moved, and so let's do what they said they're gonna do, even though maybe those safe routes folks know more than we do. I don't know that they do, because they certainly didn't take into account the rise or the traffic. They just took into what works best on the math of the kids walking, which are gonna get driven to school anyway, and that's how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said, obviously it'd be Joe's team that does the sign installation and everything.
Hold on.
Oh,
When do we have to do that? When the school opens?
I think
Because-
yeah.
yeah,
August, September.
yeah, they're looking this fall when that school will be
Then we
operational.
won't even know if kids are gonna be crossing there.
Well, that's the other part of that
know what I
conversation,
mean?
right?
No, but like Commissioner Harvey said, if we put it up there and kids cross somewhere else, then we just move the crosswalk.
Provided we get
and
the
if
okay
no
from
kids-
Sis right to school.
And if no kids
Oh.
cross, well, that's, you can, listen,
Yeah, with no kids.
you can go to
There is that.
community council meetings and you can create those routes. I mean, it's not always just a straight shot.
Yeah.
If it's safer to go somewhere else, all their job is that community council tells the school and the school district, this is the safest route for the kids. They tell the kids, they tell the families, their job's done. Whether they follow that or not is on them.
Can't force them to, right?
But I just am wondering if those kids are gonna jump on a bus.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of kids get on a bus who don't qualify for the bus, and they're gonna be, the bus is gonna be going right past them. So I don't know, I mean,
Or how many parents won't feel comfortable with their
Right.
kids walking that far, or crossing that, or.
Let's just put the worst thing we're gonna do is have a couple of breakaway posts in the ground. We can always move the signs if something changes. Let's put the investment in, let's go forward.
Okay. Fair enough.
You okay with that, Commissioner? You okay with that, Commissioner? Or you got a consensus?
Perfect. What budget does this, do you have budget for that or?
3,500 would be prop one.
Prop one, okay,
perfect.
okay.
They're loaded.
They're low. They've got money. Okay, that at least gives us a direction to move forward.
In
That's
fact,
why,
while you're doing that, Commissioners, I wouldn't mind when you're coming south to north on the top of the hill, that sign that's gonna be a warning to have a third flasher there. I think it's safe to just, to put that in now.
yeah,
Are
we
Put
talking-
an amber blinking light on top of it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
key,
Are we
or-
talking about a push button crossing or a school zone crossing?
So-
Usually they're a push button.
yeah, that's what he indicated to me,
The
was
push button,
push
right?
button.
Not
So when
like
the
at
kids are there, they
certain
push it
hours,
and the
it's
lights
gonna be
flash.
20 miles an hour.
Somebody shows up,
What's
hit the
that?
button, flash.
Like these mid-block crossings.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
But there's gotta be school advance warning signs.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I think that's 40, so there'd be 400 feet each way of that. So
So I'm saying the one 400 feet to the south would be.
put
a
an amber
flasher.
light on.
Yeah.
Flashing light.
So it's, oh, there's something coming, and then they
Yep.
get to the bottom,
Yep.
instead of just another sign on the road.
I mean, really, that's putting our best foot forward here, right? I mean,
It's the right thing to do.
kids are gonna do what kids are gonna do, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk to them about the safe routes, this property purchase stuff on there.
that'd be great. We'd love to sit down with them right away as they buy
That'd
that.
be good.
It'd help us understand their intentions as well and what to plan for,
That's
right?
great.
Be nice to hear what they're trying to do.
I can tell you with how the high school went, some advanced notice and thought and coordination probably would have been,
Well, you'll have that
Very
now. You
helpful.
got a great man that's in that area that can help with that.
Yep.
Great man.
looking forward to it. Okay, that's all I have for you, commissioners.
Really? Okay, great. That was a beautiful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank
Well, we got another, just when you thought you were finished, we've got another discussion regarding the Nordic Valley Project Survey Area Resolution. So let's change some players. We're running a little behind, commissioners, so we'll change some players and go to the next thing.
That works.
You didn't on this one?
No, I don't think I'm even
Are
on
we
this
off,
one.
are we off the air?
No, you're not on this one.
Okay,
Hey, Joe, what's the status of, Stoker Lane? Any plans on that?
no, we're just gonna keep it gravel. We were gonna pave it. We were going to pave it at one time.
Yeah, I know it. Now guess what?
Now they want it.
Now they're all.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying. Don't enjoy it.
Hey, how are you?
No, after you said.
Well, thanks for John Locke.
Well, look at you. And
Yeah.
I get you a 13.
I'm. Thanks for the offer.
There's also rice. It's too rice on this, so I don't feel so bad. Being a little cheeky. Not cheeky. It's steel. I guess that's how I have to put it, because it just calls it what it is. I mean, I do say arbitrary, but also.
It doesn't matter. Then you just give you a black.
You need some glasses, sir?
This is so hard to read.
back in red.
A little bit of both. It's nice to get it on paper. At the same time,
Hey, Quentin. Stephanie are gonna get us together for a meeting to talk about, series and, how they're running them through.
That's the way it is.
Here, and how to, the ones that are expired are possibly might be paying.
that would.
We're not paying the increment, but maybe not calculating the new growth right.
Oh,
So we're gonna get together and talk about that, and then, I got with Sarah Means.
Oh,
We're
good.
gonna get together, Brandon,
Good.
and talk about, the East Washington CRA.
Good.
So,
That's good news.
Here, Paul,
Here's another
I brought you the document that was for the
trust.
land trust for the monastery. 1,000 acres cost $9 million.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, it. I was involved with the discussion when the monastery was sold.
I think it's just helpful to Connecticut, like Richard was talking, a $10 million bond. You've got the potential of over 1,000 acres possibly in the market 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good information to take. Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Okay,
You're
thanks
Johnny-
for being here.
You're
This
Johnny on
is,
the
a-
spot.
I try and be, just for you.
I think the last name's though on the,
on the bond.
John B. on the.
Oh, that's right, Johnny.
John, yeah, not John E.
John B.
John B. on the-
John B.
Just a matter
John
of
B. on the
clarification,
spot.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay, item number 7, commissioners, is a discussion regarding Nordic Valley Project Survey Area of the resolution. Ms. Stephanie Russell, Brandon Quinney, Scott Park, Sean Wilkinson, John Vaughn, and Stephanie Ebert. We also have Brandon, he's in the, got that listed, and we're gonna have you, Ms. Russell, go ahead and start the discussion.
Absolutely. This is kind of a quick discussion. Following our processes and procedures for creating community reinvestment areas, and PIDs, we're at the stage of the Nordic Valley CRA process where, we are seeking a resolution from the commission to authorize them to put together a project area survey and budget. So this would be the initial step in, assessing that area to see what, their project's gonna look like and what tax increment would be available for that particular project. I will say regarding the CRA, it would work in conjunction with the PID that we're creating, which is the Public Infrastructure District. And those two would work hand in hand as it relates to a public infrastructure. That's something that we've been stressing over the last year, is that the county's willing to utilize tax increment in development projects as long as it goes towards public infrastructure or public amenities. And this would be the beginning step in that process to show how that increment would be utilized, if allocated. So we'd like to bring a resolution to you at your, not tomorrow's meeting, but the next meeting, to authorize the group to move forward and create a project area plan and budget for this CRA.
To authorize, just merely authorize.
Yep, just to create it
Commissioner
for
Bolos,
review. Questions?
no questions here. Commissioner Farrar?
Oh, that's just the first step, but just to clarify, we're in the process, or you're in the process, working with everybody to come up with our policy, so it's consistent across the board.
Yeah.
And that'll be done sometime after.
We're about 3 weeks out from
Okay.
that. We're wrapping up our edits on that. Yes, and this will, we wouldn't bring the project area plan and budget for approval until it goes through our policy.
Right, so
With our
what's,
policies,
I'm just saying, whatever we approve would be subject to that policy,
absolutely.
not premature.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, and we're incorporating, House Bill 12 has a lot of changes to the CRA process. And so we'll be incorporating House Bill 12, pieces into our new policy. And that includes reporting, it includes what you actually use the funds for, doing preliminary fiscal impact, assessments to show, they're actually requiring now, you have to show that the project can pretty much pencil on its own, without assistance, before creating CRAs moving forward in the future. And then, it also addresses something that's very interesting. It addresses, CRAs that have expired, that have, fund balances. That fund balance, it's mandated that it goes to housing. So any of these CRAs will, and Steph and I are working on having the cities close out their CRAs that have expired. So any of those CRAs that have fund balances, the state's gonna mandate that goes to affordable housing moving forward.
What's the effective date of that, Brandon?
I haven't looked into the effective date for that one, but I would.
We probably should do that.
Yeah.
If we're doing
That'll
that.
most likely be part of our discussion.
Yeah,
going to have.
we're having a meeting next week to
Yeah,
talk
that's-
about that.
We'll bring about some major changes and we'll have to incorporate that into our policy.
Absolutely, and that's going right into our policy too. So,
Yeah, that's a big,
Yeah.
who wrote that? Is that Ivory?
yeah, I think it was actually.
Makes sense.
Yep, yeah, so big changes on the state level. We predicted this a year ago, which is why we started revamping our policies. So we'll incorporate all of that, have that for you guys as a first draft, probably in about 3 weeks to look at, and then get that voted in. So we're excited.
Great.
That's it.
Great work.
Super. I think we're all on the same page there, so let's move forward with that. We look forward to seeing it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Wonderful.
Anything else?
I know
No.
Mr. JB has questions. He's got that look on his face. No, sir, I'm just happy to be here.
That's JB on the spot, just in case you forgot.
I'll send this,
In an email.
from a prior meeting, I'll send to all three of you this afternoon.
Thank you.
That I gave to you.
Oh, yeah, great. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much.
You are
Tim.
welcome.
Let's clear the room. Our next discussion.
We gotta leave. You're-
Yeah,
No,
Oh,
they didn't give me the date.
Oh, I'm getting an admin too. Well, people such.
Okay. I invited Bronco to our work session.
You
Yeah.
did?
No, I'm not doing that. Why would I even come up? I'm not doing. I just had to get a stir out of it.
That's funny.
well, you created most of the problems we're having to deal with right now.
Unfortunately, that's true. You gotta love him
Well, yeah, you have the option. at least.
in a way.
Yeah, but then, you know, I.
Okay, our 2:30 discussion is the sheriff's update.
Only one we're missing is the sheriff.
Christie.
Very good. Today is April 1, isn't it?
Mhm.
Wow. So did we cancel the extended department head?
Yes, sorry. Yes, we canceled that. Extended department head tomorrow.
Wait, here we go.
I called the sheriff, but he hasn't picked up. Just
Hmm.
not quite sure.
Well-
I might come in and give the report.
You want to saunter, or we've got the way talk coming up here, or do you want to adjourn? Commissioner, what's your pleasure? I'd like to hear an update from the sheriff.
Oh, sorry. Do you want me, do you have a cell phone? I think I.
I'm okay to saunter for,
I can text you.
I'm not going,
I can just call him.
Okay.
I'd just like to find out
Call Ryan Arvin Mobile.
when he thinks he'll be here.
Have a motion to saunter till 3 PM in case the sheriff shows up. All in favor?
Aye.
We're to saunter till 3. We're back here in our commission work session after we've sauntered for a few minutes. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
We're now adjourned. Thank you for joining us today.